Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to make an art journal spread with a distress ink and stencil background. I'm working in that action journal I recently started, and I picked the smooth pages because this journal has a double spread with smooth paper and a double spread with texture paper. The first color I'm using is the fossilized amber from the distress ink range. And I'm inking up almost the whole stencil, a big area. And now I'm going to spritz this with water, but I will do it off camera to not get my paper wet and in the art journal. And now I'm pressing that stencil down to my art journal page. It's something you have to experiment with a little bit. Do you need more water? Do you not need more water? Did you use too much water? It's always a little bit of a surprise, but usually the result is gorgeous. And here in the area on the top left where the pattern does not show up very well, I'm just blending in some of the ink. And I really love this combination of that watercolory look plus that interesting texture you get from the stencil. I added a bit more water again to give the top left some more texture. I think it was not enough ink, but I don't mind. I just go with that surprise stuff I get here because that makes it vibrant, fun, and in the beginning of these kind of backgrounds, I never know how they will turn out, but I have to say I never had an ugly one. There are some things you have to keep in mind when you're doing this technique. Important is that you don't cover the whole page completely. Always leave a little bit of white space because that increases the contrast and that will make your page, how should I say it, more vibrant and not as, it's more open and more loose when you have the white areas. I just quickly dried that with my heat tool and I picked out my next color, which is the, oh, I can't remember the color name. I will give you all the colors I'm using on the spread in the video description. My yellow is not 100% dry, but it is almost dry, and it's important that you dry the layers in between. Maybe not 100%, so you have some areas where they mix together, but if you leave everything wet, you will just end up with a messy background. Here I'm picking that big triangle stencil. I will give you also the links to all the stencils in the video description. And that blue is such a beautiful color, and I know it will mix a beautiful green with the yellow underneath. And that's what I love about the distress inks. It's their transparency and they layer up quite nice and give you that interesting dimension. I'm here also blending in the edges of the pattern with my brush and water. And as I said previously, I do not cover everything. I leave some white spots here and there. Also quite important is to go in with your brush and the water immediately because the ink will dry, and depending on the paper you're using, it will soak up the ink and you will not be able to move it around, and that's the case with this paper here. I think on the textured side, you would have more time to play with the inks. Maybe I will try a background, maybe with not so many stencil patterns, but just with the inks in a future video. Just that technique with the stamping with the stencils works better on the smooth paper. Again, I'm going in with my heat tool to dry the page before I add my next layer. And for this next layer, I decided to pick the black soot together with our marks number 2 stencil to bring in some really high contrast and interest. It's always a risk to go in with such a bold color, and I did not ink up a lot of the stencil, just a smaller part to make sure I don't cover my whole page, but I really like the contrast I got, and I'm now going to blend that in with my brush again to make that flow into the page. And what I really love is that grungy look you get with the black, and that my colors underneath pop even more because of that dark grayish color. Here you have to make sure not to blend that gray in all over your page, just in a few areas. I dried the background again with my heat tool, and here I'm coming in with a Distress Oxide ink for the first time. The Distress Oxides are more opaque compared to the Distress inks and can be layered on top. And I picked the peel paint. In the beginning, I wasn't sure if I should use it and then where, but I thought I would take the risk, and I was really happy with the result and how the colors work together. And I really like how this layers on top, and that green is a bit different to the one I've mixed, and that makes everything a bit more lively and vibrant. And I think it was definitely the right decision. I will now let this dry completely before I come back in and finish the page. I have already picked some collage fodder leaves that I made in the past to use them as my focal images. I will link up the video where I make these in the info cards on the top right corner. I want to do some stamping on the background to bring in more dimension. And here I picked a stamp, 2 border stamps from the pencil marks number 7, which are matching up that stencil texture from the marks number 2 stencil. And these stamps can be arranged on an acrylic block in different ways. And of course you could also cut the borders apart and use the single images separately to create a pattern. And I plan to stamp a border under the leaves where they can grow out of. And I will also stamp that to other areas on my page. And I'm using the VersaFine Clear ink. I always use this ink when I work on paper. I don't use it over acrylic paint because then it will not dry. There I would use StazOn. But with the VersaFine Clear you get better results, I would say. I don't want to add more of this border because I think it's enough. I will add some more stamping with a ticket stamp because it has just such a different texture compared to the rest of the page that I think this will add to it and give it even more interest and depth. I'm using the black ink again to make that stand out. I'm going to stamp another background image, but there I'm using the Distress Oxide peeled paint, which I've used for my last ink layer, just to bring in some other texture in a different color than black. I'm now going to finish up my page, and I picked out some collage bits and pieces from my stash which match color-wise, and I'm adhering them under my focal image. I feel that this cluster of bits and pieces works so well together, and it just catches the eye a bit more, I would say, if I would not add this underneath the leaves. I'm also going to create a sentiment, but first I'm going to adhere my leaves. I'm using a glue stick because everything is quite flat, and that will work quite nice. If I had a more stiffer paper with a more intricate shape, I would maybe use liquid craft glue to adhere them. I have stamped the sentiment from the Mixed Media Marks stamp set. There is also the ticket stamp and that other texture stamp that I've used. But I will give you all the stamp sets I've used in the video description. And I'm going to adhere this sentiment. I just want to add some white splatters before because I don't want to cover up the words accidentally. So I will adhere those afterwards. And here you can see the finished page. I hope you enjoyed this video today, and I wish you a lovely weekend. Bye!